she had actually had a stroke, and they didn't even test for it that morning.
Tonight, a sister speaks out about several Edmonton area hospital visits.
No remorse while watching my uncle's soul leave his body.
The funeral for George Floyd in Houston, Texas this afternoon.
This is just one way of learning, but you have to connect to your community.
And passing on traditional hide tanning knowledge using Zoom. Good evening, welcome to APTN National News. I'm Dennis Ward. We begin tonight in Ottawa, where Public Safety Minister Bill Blair responded to complaints over police brutality and excessive force. JB Pashagumscum has the details.
Yesterday, the Prime Minister spoke with the Commissioner of the RCMP, Brenda Lucki. Not after that, a statement was released saying that the RCMP will be outfitting some of their officers with body cams. Now, this comes amid protests in Canada, the US, and around the world against black racism and brutality at the hands of police. Today, Public Safety Minister Bill Blair agreed with the move.
Indigenous Canadians and racialized Canadians in all parts of this country, we need to do a better job of providing them support and helping their kids be successful, their communities be safer, and we have to ensure that the police that are there to serve and protect them are culturally competent, capable, professional, and accountable in how they perform those duties.
In the House of Commons today, NDP MP Mumla Kakak called for an investigation into the RCMP and a review of policing in Nunavut. She says the women in her community don't feel safe. And she also asked for more emergency shelters for women. Indigenous and Crown Relations Minister Carolyn Bennett said she is working on it with Indigenous leaders. Jamie Pashagumscum, APTN National News.
We want to hear what you think about the conversations going on about policing. Here's how you can continue the conversation. Send your emails to news@aptn.ca. Find us online at aptnnews.ca. and on youtube.com/APTN News. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for the latest Indigenous news. Drivers entering the newly reopened Mohawk community of Ganawage, just south of Montreal, are being greeted by a visible gesture of solidarity made in the wake of George Floyd's death. After rail blockades in support of the Wet'suwet'en came down earlier this year, the Mohawk Solidarity Camp and its Sacred Fire moved to a green space near the community's entrance. But firekeepers are taking on another cause in light of recent protests. In addition to signs calling for better land and water protection, Black Lives Matter is now spelt out in red letters on a prominent new banner at the site to demonstrate Black Indigenous solidarity against both police and racial violence. A true celebration of life. That's perhaps the best way to describe the funeral for George Floyd held this afternoon in his hometown of Houston, Texas.
When you feel discouraged, remember He will. God will guide you.
Family of the 46-year-old who was killed at the hands of police in Minneapolis 2 weeks ago broke down as they viewed his body one final time. But this was, as one pastor put it, a homegoing celebration with music, art, and deep Christian faith. George Floyd's family paid tribute to him and his legacy.
I'm going to miss my brother a whole lot, and I just want to say to him, I love you, and I thank God for giving me my own personal Superman. God bless you all.
No remorse while watching my uncle's soul leave his body. He begged and pleaded many times just for you to get up, but you just pushed harder. Why must this system be corrupt and broken? Laws were already put in place for the African American system to fail. And these laws need to be changed. No more hate crimes, please.
Closer to home, charges have been approved against 3 Mounties in British Columbia after the violent arrest of 2 suspects in a Prince George alley in 2016, was captured by a backyard security camera. Constable Joshua Grafton faces charges of assault with a weapon and obstruction, and Constables Wayne Connell and Kyle Sharp are charged with assault causing bodily harm. No further details have been released on the allegations. All officers remain on active duty, and their first court appearance is set for August 12th. Still to come, why commissioners with the MMIWG National Inquiry are giving the media a failing grade. Stay with us. Here's a look at Wednesday's weather forecast starting on the East Coast. Showers at 9 for St. John's, 21 in Sun in Halifax, 6 in Nain and Kuujjuaq, 11 for Cartwright. 30 above with showers in Montreal, sunny skies and 24 in Saguenay. 31 and showers in Toronto, rain and 26 in Ottawa. Rain and 19 for Thunder Bay and Wawa, showers and 12 in Sioux Lookout. 2 with rain for Churchill, 8 in Thompson. 19 with rain for Winnipeg and Brandon. Sunny skies and 21 in Swift Current. Showers and 20 for Yorkton. Showers and 21 in Meadow Lake. 9 with rain in Stony Rapids. Welcome back. Protesting housing delays and funding cuts, dozens of families from Lake St. Martin First Nation, 2 hours north of Winnipeg, took to the highway on Monday. It's now been 9 years since severe flooding led to the evacuation of thousands of citizens from 18 First Nations in the Interlake area of Manitoba. Lake St. Martin was one of the hardest hit communities. The federal government says as of this month, 109 band members remain evacuated. This group says that number is closer to 300 Lake St. Martin families. A new $200 million First Nation was built near the original community. These protesters say the chief isn't connecting people who need homes or services needed to live off reserve while they wait. And some are taking in homeless family members.
There's 14 of us in that 4-bedroom house, 3 families all together. There's so many homeless people. We're still waiting. We are demanding that the chief and council step down, and we want audits.
An Edmonton woman who suffered a stroke says she was sent home from several hospitals by doctors who told her she was only suffering from anxiety. Chris Stewart has more.
At the beginning of April, Valerie Sado began to feel unwell. Slurred speech, difficulty walking. Once per day, she says she would feel like this, and it would stop. Around the middle of April, she went to Edmonton's Misericordia Community Hospital's emergency room. She says she was given a blood test, which came back normal. She was released. The hospital said she was suffering from anxiety. She continued feeling unwell and went again to several hospitals. Misericordia again on April 24th. Northeast Medical Center, April 26th. The Royal Alexandra Hospital later that same day. She says she was again told each time that it was anxiety and sent home.
And I made 6 or 7 trips at 4 different emergency rooms.
And they all sent you home?
Yes.
On May 22nd, she was discharged again from the Royal Alexandra. That night, she went back after feeling worse. Finally, a CT scan was performed, and it found that she was having a stroke and admitted. Kathleen Sado is Valerie's sister.
And it was confirmed that they had discharged her that morning after having a stroke. She had actually had a stroke, and they didn't even test for it that morning. So that window of time that you can catch with a stroke, and they can kind of reduce the amount of damage, was totally missed.
Valerie is upset that the only testing performed until that point was a blood test.
Just frustrating that they never did anything but that. And I know that's their major diagnostic tool, But the fact that they never went beyond that is frustrating as hell to me.
She says doctors told her that she has 2 partially blocked arteries, but it is too dangerous to operate on. She says she quit smoking and has changed her diet to help prevent more strokes. Kathleen complained to Alberta Health Services about her sister's treatment. She thinks it is because she is Indigenous. APTN contacted Alberta Health Services, and they released a statement reading, "We know that trust is a significant barrier to First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people accessing the healthcare system, and acknowledge that institutional racism and stereotyping has kept people from getting the care they need. We also know that the relationship between AHS, First Nations, Métis, and Inuit Albertans must continue to improve, and we have more work to do to show how committed we are to building, nurturing, and improving those relationships in a good way." The sisters were in a conference call with hospital officials and a stroke specialist the first week of June when Valerie was discharged.
They were very apologetic. He could not explain why a CT was not done earlier. And they know something's wrong. They wouldn't outright say it. They referred to my sister, we're sorry she had this experience, over and over again.
Valerie Sado hopes that apology might prevent other people from having the same experience as her, but she is not holding her breath.
I hear those words so many times. Like, they're good at saying the words, but it's not actually put into action.
Valerie Sado says she is considering legal action. Chris Stewart, APTN National News, Edmonton.
The Cree Nation government in Quebec announced $100 million for housing. The money is partially in response to the housing crisis and the COVID-19 pandemic. Individuals can apply through their bands for home ownership. Approved individuals will receive $100,000. The money for the new housing fund comes from an agreement signed in 2008 between the Government of Canada and the Cree Nation government. The Cree Nation government says the next step is to provide money for developers on reserve.
Not only private, but also the social component of housing. And we have an agreement now with the Cree communities how it will be dispersed and how it will be, what the policies will be. Basically, it will be a subsidy to build a house in a Cree community. The subsidy will be the difference of the construction cost in a Cree community versus the construction cost in Val-d'Or and Abitibi region.
Much of the media attention around last week's anniversary of the release of the MMIWG final report centered around the word genocide. A year later, those involved weigh in on what can be celebrated and what needs to change in the media's response. Elena McDougall has that story.
We saw few change since the June 3rd last year with the media, but still not enough. And
Inquiry Commissioners Marion Balleur and Michelle Audette say that research and testimony from families and survivors revealed that positive images of lost loved ones were overlooked and they are not giving the coverage a passing grade.
I can't say that there's been a decolonizing approach adopted by those who make decisions about what stories go forward. I can't say that I have seen a lot of new faces in the media. In fact, I've read in social media about Indigenous reporters who have left mainstream media.
People
out of the media in Canada, a passing grade? No, I can't.
A year has passed, and according to Audette, so have opportunities.
During the election, media didn't put back the call for justice, didn't put back all politicians to say, you ordered this inquiry, where you're at with this. So sometimes it's so powerful, and sometimes we disappeared.
3 days after its release, the CBC's Michael Enright referred to the report's conclusion of genocide as a distraction. The editorial board at the Globe and Mail wrote, the charge of a continuing genocide in Canada is absurd.
Violence that Indigenous women and girls have experienced
amounts to genocide.
Fanny LaFontaine penned a legal analysis of genocide in a supplementary report for the inquiry.
The genocide is different acts and omissions across decades that aimed at the destruction of Indigenous peoples as a social unit. And then this explains the actual violence against women and girls.
LaFontaine said the pushback was expected.
What I usually did was to turn the voice back to Indigenous peoples, ask them, why it's not absurd and how it makes sense. And it was very interesting and very much to be expected. And the commissioners and I, we discussed this before, sort of making out this argument and doing this. It was to be expected.
Candace Callison is an associate professor at the School of Journalism at the University of British Columbia. She acknowledged that many great stories preceded the report's release, but shock at how widespread the issues are, combined with the professional norm of skepticism to new data, may have impacted a national response.
Here, this is a report put out by a judge, by somebody who's done all of the research and talked to all of the families and people who have really suffered as they've watched loved ones go missing, as they've had loved ones turn up murdered, as communities have grieved, right? So to me, the kind of hubris of then challenging that as if there is some sort of counter data, as if there is another side, I think really reflects the more problematic practices in journalism, and also the problem of there not being any Indigenous people who are working at many of the upper and supervisory levels of journalism, but often also in the newsroom.
Audette and Buller hope more Indigenous journalists will enter the field.
Do it.
Hashtag just do it.
Elena McDougall, APTN National News, Hamilton.
To Ontario now. We're at a press conference on Monday. Premier Doug Ford was asked if he would commit to passing a bill that would implement the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, also known as UNDRIP, into Ontario law. Ford said, quote, "There's never one step to do reconciliation," end quote. NDP Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation critic Saul Mamakwa introduced Bill 76, the UNDRIP bill, in March of last year. It quickly passed 2 readings and was sent to a legislative committee. Mamakwa wants to see progress soon.
It's like any other bill, and where we actually have hearings, make sure we get feedback. And I think that's the next step. And certainly, once that is done, then you send it back to the House and make sure that the colleagues, the MPPs, vote on it, and that'd be the 3rd reading, and hopefully, so it doesn't. Again, it's been about a year, and those are the steps that we need to be able to move forward on.
Still to come, passing down tradition during a global pandemic. Here's a look at the rest of Wednesday's weather forecast, picking back up in northern Alberta. Sunny and 24 in Grand Prairie, 19 for High Level, 22 under sunny skies in Medicine Hat, Lethbridge, and Edmonton. Rain and 19 in Vancouver, showers and 18 in Victoria. Sunny and 22 in Fort Nelson, 17 with rain for Smithers. 19 and showers in Old Crow, sunny and 20 for Mayo. 23 above for Fort Liard and Trout Lake, 12 for Yellowknife. 5 in Sax Harbor, 12 for Pawlatuck. +2 with snow in Baker Lake and Chesterfield, 4 above in Cambridge Bay, 3 in Arctic Bay, 2 in Joe Haven. Welcome back. Sad news out of Montreal now, where a humpback whale that had lifted the spirits of Montrealers by swimming around the St. Lawrence River over the past week appears to have died. This video posted on Facebook by maritime pilot Simon LeBron depicts the mammal's seemingly lifeless body in the river near Isle Beauregard, about 40 kilometers north of where it was first seen When the wayward whale was first spotted, authorities said it wasn't distressed and was probably searching for food. Well, on a brighter note, when the weather thaws, so do hides, marking the annual hide-making camps north of 60. But with COVID-19 restrictions, knowledge sharing looks a little different. Charlotte Moore-Jacobs has that story.
Tanya Larson's physical environment for hide tanning in 2020 looks different. But the DNA value of passing on what she knows hasn't changed one bit.
I'm going to show you how to make one of these bone tools.
Instructing how to make hide tanning tools over Zoom was a first.
It was nice to do it from home because I have all the tools and such, but it was also, it's completely different. I do not know how teachers do it right now.
While she's only been tanning hides for 5 years, Larson is part of the resurgence of traditional practice in Yellowknife and across the north. And she knows just how tough it can be starting out.
Oftentimes we talk about the physical aspect of it, but I think for me the hardest was the emotional part of it, and dealing with the shame of not knowing these activities that should have been, I should have been around since I was so young, and to actually find access to anyone who could teach me and be able to coordinate that in a good way. So
the workshop, hosted by NWT Aboriginal Sports Circle, drew over 20 participants.
Culturally, I'm just wondering about using a moose scraper on a caribou hide. Would you keep only to caribou bones for caribou hides?
I don't know. Those are the kind of questions that you would ask your elders.
A hide scraper wasn't the only tool students left with.
This is just one way of learning, but you have to connect to your community. This workshop will, give you a list of questions that you can seek out in your own community.
You could use this to scrape your hide, but if you're at camp, you kind of want your tools to look good.
Even as hide camps are canceled because of the COVID-19 pandemic, the benefits of the traditional practice live on.
Being connected to the land and being connected to the community and people within the community, and it's really recreating those connections that things like colonization and residential school did their best to break.
Charlotte Moore-Jacobs, APTN National News, Yellowknife.
Great work. Hopefully we'll see the reopening of camps soon. That's your APTN National News for this Tuesday. For much more, visit our website, aptnnews.ca, and never miss a story by downloading the APTN News app. I'm Dennis Ward. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great night.